how we almost lost this masterpiece, the story of the passion of Joan of Arc. We're gonna look at that by Forgotten Real. Also, please consider liking and subscribing. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Alright, so this is usually about movies, because it just is usually about movies, so we'll see what's going on. With this, I have no idea. Of course, I think most people know who Joan of Arc is. Right? But anyway, we're going on. We're going in.
It is the shared fate of every artwork that it disappears. For some, this can take decades, centuries, even millennia. But eventually, no matter its significance, artistic value, or price, every painting, photo, sculpture, film, video game, novel, or poem will cease to exist.
Would I agree with that now with the internet being here? Right? Would I agree with that? Honestly, I kind of wouldn't. Actually, I'm gonna disagree with that with the internet being around. Unless, right? Companies make the active effort, right? Like Nintendo, for example, they really like to do this. Unless companies actually try to make the effort of yoinking it off the internet, it's probably gonna be hard to rid us of a lot of the more modern media. Now, older media that cannot be converted into like digital, sure, right, fair, but I think this does not count for modern media that you can now just shove in on the internet.
Though some solace can be found in the idea that for a period of time, whether it be short or long, most artworks can be enjoyed. But some works are less fortunate in their lifespan, doomed to a short existence.
The only issue that I probably agree with is that the physical version of said piece might disappear or get destroyed, right? Those are actually not for forever, right? So like, right, you can now still look at the Mona Lisa. You probably cannot look at the Mona Lisa in like 200 years, but you can still see pictures of it online. Who knows, right? That might happen. You never know.
And one film in particular seemed to have been relegated to a lifespan one can consider unfairly short considering its quality and impact. Carl Theodor Dreyer's 1928 masterpiece, The Passion of Joan of Arc. This is the story of how it was made, how it was lost, and how it was saved from the dustbins of history. The film's creation began with an invitation Dreyer received to make a film in France after the success of his previous outing, The Master of the House. After considering a few ideas about famous women from French history, such as a film about either Marie Antoinette or Catherine de' Medici, he settled on the story of Joan of Arc, the teenage peasant girl who claimed to have received angelic visions telling her to aid France in its battle against Britain during the 100 Years' War, who was then captured, tried for heresy and burned at the stake.
Yep. By the way, one of the most based women in human history. It's really interesting. It's also the perfect counter to, yeah, but Christianity didn't have any important women. It was all just men. Here's the counter. Here's the ultimate counter.
A story he was interested in due to the theme of suffering. It is suffering which is the theme in many of my films. Suffering always means ennoblement. Though the part of Joan's life he decided to focus on was not her heroic battles, but the trial which preceded her defeat and capture. And as a source, he utilized the trial transcripts, taking a majority of the film's dialogue word for word from it, though embellishing with the trial's time frame, contracting it into a single day. It was his intent to strip away her mythology and show Joan as he really was, as it says in the film's opening text scroll, not the Joan in the helmet and armor.
Well, obviously, right? I'm hoping at least that it tried to be historically accurate, because nowadays we don't really try that, right, Odyssey? Anyway, about Poke, do we know if Joan of Arc was real? Yes, she was. We have real documentation. Right? We have all that.
But simple and human. This differs from most adaptations of her story, such as the concurrently released The Marvelous Life of Joan of Arc, which depicts a far more idealized and heroic version of Joan. The film opens in the middle of the proceedings. Throughout it, we see Joan get subjected to a series of agonizing questions and other maltreatments, as her judges try to make her confess.
They brought to spit on her? Crazy work.
Reasons for this are multifarious, but chief among them is her perceived heresy, as her claiming to receive visions both goes against the church's authority and contradicts the English king's claim to France, as Joan believed she was commanded by God to drive him and his men from the land. They try various methods, be it trickery by writing a false letter from the French king, or with the threat of torture. It is finally the fear.
It's funny that these dudes, while trying to figure out if what she was doing was heresy, right? Committed heresy. It's kind of hilarious.
Fear of getting burned at the stake which brings her to confessing. Though her concession is short-lived, as Joan realizes she has betrayed her lord and rescinds her confession. The film ends with her execution by fire, which is followed by an ahistorical riot. To bring this story to life, Dreyer went through painstaking effort to achieve historical accuracy, calling his film a
Based, I think this is great. Wonderful. Why do the old guys look like Poke? Except I have hair. These do not have hair. Well, not full hair at least. But yeah, very good. I like that a lot. I think that's a good decision to try to keep historically accurate with this
documentary. Besides the aforementioned lifting of the entire dialogue from the trial transcripts, Dreyer also made sure to ground his film through its aesthetics. To begin with, there is not a single actor who can be said to have been prettied up or glamorized, Dreyer forbidding the use of makeup, even the simplest of powders. This is especially effective in the case of Joan's actress, Renee Jean Falconetti, who would not have looked the part of a peasant girl who had been locked up for months with the customary.
Also very good. Also very good. Theodore Dreyer has the same haircut as you. But my hair's decently long again already. So that doesn't really make sense. Anyway. Very good. Honestly, yeah, makes sense, right? Why would you put makeup on a quote unquote random girl? You wouldn't. I wonder though if she was put into as a military leader, if that was shown, because she was in fact a military leader.
Makeup seen in a lot of Hollywood films, giving her an appropriate plainness. Dreyer entered some excessive territory as well in his search for accuracy, such as requiring that every actor playing a monk would shave their head, even if they would be wearing a cap the entire film, or having a stand-in get cut for real in this shot. Though that pales in comparison to the costliest of his excesses, that being the construction of an entire concrete castle set, replete with 4 towers, a moat and drawbridge, chapel, along with a storage and rest area for the crew. This being done in spite of the fact that the usually tight framing allows one to see little of the gigantic set. Though as painful as it must have been to his financiers' wallets, Dreyer believed a life-sized and complete set was necessary, as it would have helped the actors immerse themselves better in their roles. The set was also not just troublesome due to its cost, but also because it left little room for the camera and light crew to set up their equipment, forcing them to dig holes in the walls and floor to get everything set up.
Interesting. I mean, well, what you don't do for a, how do you say it? Properly believable set. What you don't do for that. Crazy. I think that's very cool. Right? That's very cool. But see, you had to get creative with no CGI. Nowadays, right, you don't really have to do that, but back then, right, you have to get creative, right? You had to get creative. So there's that.
Correctly. Though despite this strict adherence to realism, the castle set does feel somewhat anachronistic, with many unsymmetrical windows and misshapen rooftops, which may be the personal touch of production designer Herman Worm, who had worked 8 years prior on The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, another film with very extreme and misshapen architecture. And like that film, the castle's strange design is perhaps intended to reflect how Joan sees it, her surroundings seeming distorted through her eyes, reflecting her mental state. The cinematography could similarly be said to show her perspective, both literally and emotionally. Dreyer said that the transcript informed the film's style, that he wanted to bring to life the close-quarter combat between Joan and the men judging her. The film's cinematographic style can be said to be disorienting. A majority of the shots are close-ups, especially of Joan's face, and even some of the wider frames show little. Dreyer even goes so far as to avoid the use of establishing shots as much as possible, which captures Joan's feelings of claustrophobia and isolation. The many close-ups of her clerical opponents serve a similar purpose, their leery, gleeful and often sadistic faces dominating the frame to intensify their verbal attacks against Joan and expressing the sense of being surrounded on all sides by hostility. Though what...
Interesting. I guess, a lot of focus on faces then, which is interesting. Fun fact, right? Right? She did essentially, right? She is considered a French war hero, right? War heroine. Heroine. Right? She was rehabilitated, right, as well, during the 1400s, and declared a saint during the 1920s. So there's that, the Roman Catholic Church. So there's that, at least, right? At least some form of a good end, right? That is what happened as well, right? But yeah, it's interesting.
really creates the film's sense of disorientation is the editing, which for its time was more fast-paced and rapid than most films. The Passion of Joan of Arc has over 1,300 shots, excluding the title cards, which is more than twice the average number for films at the time, and stands in stark contrast to the rest of Dreyer's oeuvre, which consists of films that often had far longer and lingering shots, as Dreyer cut between frames in fast procession, few of them lasting more than 5 seconds, all to further enhance each scene's intensity. Especially the many times Joan is questioned and harangued, and of course when she is threatened with torture, where the fast-paced cutting helps sell the fear and anxiety of the character. It must be noted that even though no torture takes place, and there is not a drop of blood shed, this scene still holds much of its power, helped by the many shots of the spiked wheel, which often seems dangerously close. Though the most important part of the film's imagery, and its most iconic, is the performance of Renée Jean Falconetti as Joan. One of the main aspects of silent era films that often alienates modern day audiences is the acting, which today seems far too exaggerated, almost cartoonish in how the actors overemphasize every movement. The reason for this being that the more subtle form of...
Well, because, well, that kind of makes sense, right? You don't have voice, you don't have sound to convey the story, right? You don't have that. So you gotta use the only form of language you have, which is body language, right? And of course, you're gonna use that to the fullest extent, right? So it kind of makes sense.
Acting we know today had not been developed yet, so actors back then were still using the same techniques they employed in the theater, where the more exaggerated movements were necessary to convey a character's actions to an audience that was far away. And one can see a similar problem here, as some of the judges seemed cartoonishly evil. Falconetti's performance, though, feels modern. There is a good reason why so much of the screen time is fixed on her, as Falconetti managed to depict all of Joan's feelings to perfection and with ideal intensity. Every tear shed, every determined mad glare, every pleading cry feeling as heart-wrenching now as it did back in the film's inception. Falconetti imbuing her character with life and nuance. The process of bringing out this performance was grueling to say the least, though not to the degree that some people have claimed.
Honestly, she does a good job, right? I can tell the emotions are very well conveyed, right? Acting in silent movies seem way harder. It seems, right, because you only have one form of storytelling, right? And that is just, like, body language. It seems that you have to put in a lot more physical effort, for sure, though.
According to rumors, Falconetti was forced to kneel on stone and then wipe the emotions from her face. A not too uncommon an accusation for Dreyer, who had an exaggerated reputation as a tyrant on set. Though later biographers of Dreyer dispelled such stories with quotes from people who were there on set to view their working relationship. That is not to say that Falconetti's ordeal was light. as he had to redo her takes several times, Dreyer often sitting right next to her off-screen, whispering directions into her ear, with none of her co-actors around, and as few crew members as possible present, only then to repeat that process after viewing the rushes, during which time Dreyer would point out what he liked and disliked, so Falconetti could adjust her performance for the next gauntlet of reshoots. What is also remarkable about Falconetti is that she was not known for her dramatic work, and had only 2 minor film credits behind her. She was in fact most known for her comedic work on stage, and would not have at first struck anyone as an ideal candidate to depict Joan of Arc. Though when he went to a play she performed in, Dreyer...
Interesting. So like from like something comedic to something more serious. But honestly, on Wikipedia for the actress, she has like 4 different names. That's interesting. Well, that's a lot of names. Right. But I've seen that over the years of actors that usually do more comedic stuff, slowly switching to like more serious movies, right? Right. It's like, for example, right, we can look at like Kevin James, right? Sometimes doing more serious stuff, especially nowadays. Adam Sandler doing sometimes more serious stuff. Right, we have that. We have that. Who else? Yeah, but there's quite a few that do this, right? That like start out with like something more comedic and then do something more serious. We have that. Jean Falconetti, sometimes called credited as Maria Falconetti, Mary Falconetti, Maria Falconetti, or simply Falconetti. Interesting.
did see something in her which he felt was perfect for the character. According to Falconetti's daughter, Helena, it was because she had the eyes of a suffering woman. And although it is impossible to say if Dreyer caught a glimpse of this, Falconetti had indeed suffered from severe mental problems, which would lead to her demise almost 2 decades after the film's premiere, when she starved herself to death. Although her life on screen and on Earth was short, she has still been immortalized by her unforgettable performance, her pained expression becoming one of the most iconic imagery in cinematic history, and it is hard to imagine a Passion of Joan of Arc without her, as according to Dreyer, it was her who created the images, not me. As for the film's score, this is where it gets quite complicated. Dreyer never felt that he had found a definitive score for the film. Even the orchestral performance, played live at the film's premiere, does not hold that title, and since early on its score has been all over the place, the film receiving a different one at its Paris premiere, and was then rescored again in the 1950s for the Leduc version of the film, which we'll get to, and which Dreyer disapproved of. Due to this, it has become customary.
Interesting, huh? Interesting. He switched up scores. She never acted after this, and the 2 movies she was in before this, I can't find this anywhere, so I guess. Interesting. Well, he just couldn't decide.
For different releases to rescore the film in kind, and besides the 3 previously mentioned, the film has had 27 different soundtracks, most for live performances, though the scores that are most easily accessible today are Mia Yanashida's piano rendition, Lauren Connor's avant-garde take, Will Gregory's and Adrian Atley's version, and then Richard Einhorn's orchestral score. Each score has its strong points, but some are far superior to others. The Yanashida version is acceptable and fits the film's mood, though it lacks some of the force which certain scenes require, a single piano not being enough to induce the film's emotions.
This guy, when he smiles, it looks like he's about to touch her instead of, like, I don't know, smiling. Whatever's going on here. Crazy.
Lauren Connor's score is interesting, consisting mostly of guitar drones, but it gets old and grating early on in the film, offering the same mood throughout, and feeling a bit too modern for such an old film, making the score and film a mismatch. The same can be said of the Gregory and Atley score, though their music is much more varied and befitting of the film's tone, and some of the medieval-inspired tunes do fit more with the story's era, but there is again this mismatch between how old the film is and how modern the soundtrack feels, which leaves only Richard Einhorn, whose score I consider to be the ideal version of the film, not only because orchestral music has a timeless quality, relieving it of the mismatching issues of the 2 previously mentioned scores, but also because its operatic and epic qualities complement the film's emotions better than any other soundtrack. Its chorus is also utilized in an interesting way, acting as a sort of supplement to the lack of spoken dialogue. As an example, the male chorus often represents the judges, their domineering and powerful voices booming in almost every scene, and the pleading female chorus represents Joan's voice. And there are also some neat details.
Interesting. Very interesting. It's like, to be fair, that is kind of true. Music can make or break, definitely make or break a movie. I can tell that, I can see that, right? I mean, that comes with video games as well, right? Soundtrack can definitely be a big plus. It can definitely be a big plus. There's a lot of games that have are shit, but they have a great soundtrack, or they're mid, but they have a great soundtrack, and that helps a lot. Someone made an AI remaster on YouTube. We love AI. We indeed do. AI remasters, wonderful.
Such as the fact that Einhorn recorded the actual bell in the church the real Joan of Arc would have prayed in and mixed it into the score. It is also important to note that Dreyer was not adverse to showing his film in total silence, and may have preferred it that way. Due to its impact and iconic status, it is hard to imagine that the Passion of Joan of Arc was nearly lost to time, due in part to scandal, censorship, and pure bad luck. Its existence was already threatened before it was even finished, as due to her status as a French historical hero who was known for defending against a foreign invader, Joan of Arc was much beloved by French nationalists, who objected to a Protestant Dane like Dreyer directing a film about a French heroine. This includes the screenwriter for the concurrently released The Marvelous Life of Joan of Arc, Jean-José Frappa, who claimed that Dreyer could not give them a Joan in the French tradition, though Dreyer was of the opposite opinion, saying, "As a neutral, I see the whole process more clearly than a Frenchman might have been able to do. I don't believe that Joan's judges were motivated by bloodthirstiness, but from their faith and conviction, and from being blinded by dogma. I actually am convinced that they all have the deepest sympathy for the young maid, and I have tried to show that." Dreyer's troubles would continue after the film's release, when he was forced to delay its French premiere to show it to representatives of the Catholic Church and government censors, who demanded several cuts, such as the wholesale removal of the scene where the judges tried to blackmail Joan by withholding the sacrament. And just to add on to his misfortune, the German studio where the film was processed and stored burned down, the original negative getting destroyed in the process, leaving a scant few copies swimming around, all of whom disappeared one by one over the years. He was able to resurrect his film in some form by editing a new version utilizing unused takes, but that would burn up as well in a lab fire, leaving audiences unable to view the film for over 2 decades until in 1951.
Interesting. Okay, wow. How much bad luck can you actually have? Like, how much bad luck can you get? That is an okay, that's interesting. How much bad luck can you have? That, like, you are the point where this even, like, that's interesting. Burned down twice.
The film historian Joseph Marie Loduca discovered a copy of the second cut, which he released after giving it some major alterations, such as a new Baroque score, replacing some intertitles with subtitles, and what few intertitles he left were changed from the black background to a stained glass window, all in an attempt to modernize the film. Dreyer reviled this re-edit, especially for its music, which he considered ill-fitting due to it coming from a later period than when the film occurs, and because of its loudness, claiming that simple silence would make a bigger impression. And for a long while, the only way to view The Passion of Joan of Arc was in its mutilated and altered form, the film having, ironically, received a similar fate to its subject, accused unfairly of blasphemy by overzealous clergymen, battered, then burned. But unlike Joan, the film would make a return in 1981 when several film canisters bearing its title were discovered in a janitor's closet in the Norwegian mental institute, Digerman Hospital. Some have speculated that a friend of Dreyer's had been the institute's director, and that he had borrowed a copy only to never return it, meaning that one of cinema's greatest masterpieces had been saved from oblivion because someone was too lazy to return a film he had borrowed from a friend. A few years later, it was viewed and confirmed to be the original uncensored cut, and was restored and re-released for the whole world to see. And since then, it has enjoyed a safer...
Lucky. So lucky, right? So fucking lucky. Damn. That's like essentially, right? That's like you might as well get a lottery ticket at this point. That is insanely lucky. That is so damn lucky. I got a haircut. I'm semi-bald. Wonderful. See, poker negligence is good. I suppose for once it can be useful. I suppose for once it can be useful. It is okay. Fair, fair. I got a haircut. I'm semi-bald. Bald, bald. Anyway, that I guess you could call that incredibly lucky.
Existence, film conservators making sure to update it to every new format, so future generations can enjoy it. Though as joyous as that is, there are still a plethora of films that were not as lucky. It is estimated that around 90% of silent era films are lost forever, due mainly in part to the flammability of the nitrate film stock they were recorded on, as the two fires that extinguished the Passion of Joan of Arc's life twice were just a few amongst many. And some of these lost films are quite significant, including possible classics and masterpieces, such as hundreds of Georges Méliès films, an early Hitchcock piece, a plethora of F.W. Murnau.
Honestly, kinda sucks, right? It kinda sucks. But what can you do? That's like the main issue, right, with these. They're flammable. If they weren't flammable, things like this wouldn't happen, but well, they are. So, well, we have to deal with this. At least nowadays we don't have that issue. Nowadays we have different issues. Quality.
Murnau's films, such as an unofficial adaptation of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and a film that is often considered one of his best, Four Devils. And what few surviving films we have are often not left unscathed, such as Fritz Lang's Metropolis, which is missing a scene, and Erich von Stroheim's overly ambitious near 8-hour epic,
Of course. Erich von Stroheim.
Greed, which was cut down to little over 2 hours by NGM Studios against the director's wishes, and the closest approximation of his finished film exists in a patchwork form, with few remaining scenes the conservators had being stitched together with still photographs. This should give you enough context to know just how tremendously lucky we are to have the Passion of Joan of Arc in its finished state, but also how unlucky it is that numerous films have been lost to flame, degradation, and studio chop jobs. And even though many of our modern formats are far more stable than nitrate film stock, they too will disappear as well. DVDs and Blu-rays degrade. Even digital media is not impervious, being susceptible to data rot and relying on the computers and hard drives it is stored on, pieces of tech that will break.
I mean, true. That's true. Data rot. That is very true, right? Not to that crazy degree, but that's very true. I mean, if we look at like the versions that, for example, Netflix and Amazon Prime and so far and so on, right? It's just wanted to make a long movies. I'm surprised he didn't mention London After Midnight. Interesting. Yeah, that's mentioned everywhere, right? But like, looking at this, it's kind of right. We look at these versions and they're like worse versions, right? Than the Blu-ray. It's like very interesting, right? They all have sometimes worse versions than the originals, and that's kind of sad and depressing, right? That shouldn't be the case, right? But they're really bad at preserving as well.
Down as well. So I want there to be 3 takeaways from this video. 1. If you find a bunch of film canisters, for the love of God, keep them cold and away from flame and get them to a film conservator. 2. We should be more thankful to the people and organizations that dedicate untold hours to tracking down lost media to preserve and restore it. Because they are not just bringing back a piece of entertainment, they are also keeping the past alive. And 3. Try to enjoy your favorite work of art as much as possible, because there's no telling how long it will last.
Interesting. Well, that's pretty much the end of the video. Our works in stone, in paint, and print are spared. Some of them for a few decades or a millennium or two, but everything must finally fall in war or wear away into the ultimate and universal ash. The triumphs, the frauds, the treasures, and the fakes. A fact of life, we're going to die. Be of good heart. Cry the dead artists out of the living past. Our songs will all be silenced. But what of it going on said? What of it? Go on singing. Who's that quote from? Orson Welles. Not bad. Not bad. That was actually a fun. That was actually a fun video. Poke. I still think you are hiding copies from me. I do not have the old movies like that. I have a few. VHS still laying around. There might be some movies that you can't access really anywhere, but that's about it. That's about it. That's all I have. I don't have a copy of London After Midnight. I'm so sorry.